Ethan Cross had everything that looked like success and nothing that felt like life. As the CFO of one of the city's fastest-growing tech firms, his days were filled with numbers, acquisitions, and boardroom victories, yet his nights echoed with silence inside a penthouse that felt more like a hotel than a home. His marriage had ended quietly years ago, his phone rarely buzzed with anything other than work, and the more money he earned, the more invisible he felt to the world. On a cold Thursday evening, exhausted from another endless meeting, Ethan stopped at a small neighborhood grocery store instead of his usual upscale market, craving something ordinary, something real. That was when he noticed her. She stood at the customer service counter clutching a baby wrapped in a faded blanket, her shoulders hunched as if she were bracing against more than just the cold. The cashier's voice was low but firm, explaining store policy, while the woman's hands trembled as she placed a can of infant formula on the counter. She apologized again and again, her voice cracking as she said she just needed to return it because her card had declined and she had no cash left. The baby whimpered softly, and that sound cut through Ethan in a way no balance sheet ever had. He watched as the cashier slid the formula back toward her and shook her head, explaining that opened items couldn't be returned. The woman nodded, eyes glossy, and whispered thank you anyway before turning to leave. Something in Ethan snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, like a long-ignored part of him waking up. He stepped forward without thinking, paid for the formula, and handed it to her. She froze, staring at him like he'd just rewritten the rules of her world. She tried to refuse, embarrassed, pride battling desperation, but Ethan gently insisted. Her name was Maya, she said, a single mother who'd lost her job when the daycare shut down, who'd been stretching every dollar until there were none left to stretch. As she thanked him, tears finally spilling over, Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not pity, not charity, but connection. As Maya walked out into the night, Ethan stood there holding a receipt he didn't need, realizing this moment mattered far more than any deal he'd ever closed. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. Maya's face, the way she'd hugged the formula like it was treasure, replayed in his mind over and over. The next morning, instead of heading straight to the office, he returned to the same grocery store, half hoping, half fearing he'd see her again. He didn't. But he did speak to the store manager, quietly arranging a prepaid account for any struggling parents who might need baby supplies, insisting his name stay out of it. Days later, fate intervened again when Ethan spotted Maya sitting on a park bench, rocking her baby while scrolling anxiously through her phone. This time, they talked longer. He listened, really listened, as she told him about her dreams of finishing her nursing degree, about nights she skipped meals so her baby wouldn't, about how lonely motherhood felt when you had no safety net. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions right away. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to fix a problem, he was simply present. Over the weeks that followed, their paths kept crossing. Ethan helped Maya find childcare resources, connected her with a job opening at a medical startup his company partnered with, and quietly covered the cost of her enrollment to finish her degree, never as a savior, always as a supporter. But the biggest change wasn't in Maya's life alone. Ethan began showing up differently at work, launching internal programs to support single parents, advocating for flexible hours, and redirecting corporate profits toward real human impact. The lonely CFO who once measured life in numbers began measuring it in moments, first smiles, small victories, shared laughter. Months later, when Maya walked across the stage to receive her nursing certification, she spotted Ethan in the crowd, clapping harder than anyone. In that instant, both of them understood something powerful. Kindness given without expectation doesn't just change circumstances, it changes souls. Ethan was no longer lonely, and Maya was no longer alone. Their lives weren't perfect, but they were full, and it all started with a single can of formula and one choice to care, the weeks. That followed Maya's graduation passed quietly, but something deep and irreversible had shifted in both of their lives. Ethan didn't announce his generosity or seek gratitude. Instead, he retreated into a kind of thoughtful awareness he had never practiced before. He noticed things now, the way employees avoided asking for time off, the exhaustion behind polite smiles, the invisible weight people carried while pretending everything was fine. Maya, meanwhile, stepped into her new job with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Every morning, as she dressed her baby and prepared for work, she remembered the night at the grocery store, not as a moment of rescue, but as the first time in a long while someone had seen her without judgment. She worked harder than anyone else, not because she felt she owed Ethan, but because she finally believed her effort mattered. One evening, months later, she invited Ethan for coffee, not to thank him again, but simply to talk. They sat across from each other in a small cafe filled with soft music and the smell of roasted beans, and for the first time, Ethan spoke about his own loneliness. He told her how success had slowly hollowed him out, how people treated him like a title instead of a human being, how he'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed for who he was rather than what he could provide. Maya listened without interrupting, the way he once listened to her in the park, and in that quiet exchange, something mutual formed, respect, understanding, and an unexpected friendship that felt steady and real. Ethan's influence within the company continued to grow, but now it moved in a different direction. He championed paid parental leave, emergency childcare funds, and quiet assistance programs that protected dignity instead of exposing need. Employees noticed. Productivity increased, but more importantly, trust did. People stayed late not out of fear, but loyalty. Maya became a symbol, not publicly, not officially, but among those who knew. Her story circulated like a reminder that leadership could have a heart. She never allowed herself to be defined by her struggle, but she never forgot it either. She volunteered at shelters, donated formula anonymously, and when she saw another young mother hesitating at a store counter one afternoon, she paid it forward without hesitation, her hands steady, her voice calm, her baby now laughing in her arms. Ethan watched from a distance that day, realizing the ripple he'd started no longer belonged to him. Time softened everything. Ethan's penthouse no longer felt empty because he stopped running from silence. Instead, he filled his life with meaning, mentorship, community work, shared meals instead of solo dinners. Maya's life stabilized, then flourished, not because hardship vanished, but because she was no longer alone in it. On the baby's first birthday, she invited Ethan, unsure if he would come. He did. He stood there, holding a small wrapped gift, watching Maya smile as her child smeared cake across the table, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt something settle peacefully in his chest. Not pride. Not ownership. Gratitude. Gratitude that life had interrupted his routine at exactly the right moment.